To carry your freezer through a 5-day blackout on a home battery, you need roughly 6 usable kilowatt hours. That is about half a Powerwall, and somewhere near $4,500. Or you can put 100 liters of tap water inside the freezer, which costs about $10 in bottles and does exactly the same job. Same 5 days, same food. The reason that works is a number almost nobody knows. Freezing water stores the same cold as chilling it by 80 degrees Celsius, which makes ice one of the densest cold stores available to you. This is not a hack somebody invented on the internet. The World Health Organization pre-qualified it in 2010 for vaccine storage, and tens of thousands of these units are running today with no battery in them at all. Let us dive in. Ask somebody why they want a home battery, and you will get an answer about the lights. The lights are not the reason. Run the numbers on an actual blackout and look at what you are really protecting. Your lighting, if it is LED, draws a handful of watts per room. A phone charger is a rounding error. A router runs on almost nothing, and if all of that failed completely, you would manage. People have read by candlelight for most of recorded history, and a $20 head torch will get you through a week without anybody in the household seriously suffering. None of that justifies 5 figures. Now open the freezer. Inside it is a chest of meat, fish, batch cooking, and a year of somebody's garden. For most households, that is several $100s of food, and in a rural or hunting household, it can be considerably more than that. It also represents work a whole autumn of picking, portioning, and labeling. And the rule with frozen food is unforgiving. Once it thaws, you cannot simply refreeze it and pretend nothing happened. You either cook it immediately or you throw it away. The published guidance is blunt about how long you have. A full freezer will hold a safe temperature for roughly 48 hours if you keep the door shut. A half-full freezer manages about 24. 2 days. That is your entire margin. So when somebody sits at a kitchen table and signs a $10,000 quote for a battery, the specification driving that purchase is almost never, "I would like to watch television during a storm." It is, "I do not want to lose everything in that freezer." Nobody says that out loud, because it sounds too small to justify the price. It sounds like buying a bank vault to protect a wallet. But it is the honest answer, and it matters enormously, because it tells you exactly what problem you are actually trying to solve. You are not buying a battery to keep the lights on. You are buying it to keep the food cold. And the moment you say it that plainly, a different question appears. If the thing you are protecting is cold, why are you storing electricity at all? You do not have to store the electricity that makes the cold. You can store the cold. Look at what a battery is actually doing in this arrangement. Sunlight arrives during the day. A panel converts it to electricity. You put that electricity into a chemical cell, where it sits until nightfall. Then you take it back out again, feed it into a compressor, and the compressor removes heat from a box. 2 conversions, a 5-figure component in the middle, and every one of those steps loses something. Now take the middle out entirely. Run that compressor during the day, while the sun is actually shining and the panel is producing. Let it do its work then, and put the result somewhere that will hold it until morning. Ice holds it. And look at what kind of storage medium ice is. It does not degrade with use. There is no cycle count ticking down. It cannot catch fire, cannot enter thermal runaway, and cannot fail in a cold shed over winter. It will perform exactly the same on its 10,000th freeze as it did on its first. It also costs nothing because it is already in your plumbing. A battery stores the electricity that makes cold. Ice stores the cold itself and skips the middleman. The only question left is how much cold you can fit inside a bottle of water. Water has 2 completely different capacities for holding cold, and almost nobody knows about the second one. The first is called sensible heat. That is the energy it takes to change something's temperature, the number you can feel, and the number a thermometer reports. For water, it is 4.186 kilojoules per kilogram per degree Celsius, and that figure is already exceptional. Water holds more heat per degree than almost any common substance on Earth, which is why the ocean governs the climate rather than the other way around. That is the number a water tank runs on. The second number is called the latent heat of fusion, and it behaves in a way that feels wrong the first time you meet it. It is the energy required to turn water at 0 degrees into ice at 0 degrees. Read that again. There is no change in temperature at all. The thermometer does not move. You are simply rearranging molecules from a liquid into a crystal, and that rearrangement, all by itself, costs an enormous amount of energy. The figure is 334 kilojoules per kilogram. Now put the two side by side, because the ratio between them is the entire video. Divide 334 by 4.186. The answer is 79.8. Freezing 1 kilogram of water stores the same amount of cold as chilling that same kilogram of water by 80 degrees Celsius. 80 degrees in a substance that boils at 100. That single number is why ice exists as a technology rather than a curiosity, and why every civilization that could get its hands on it built an industry around it. There is a second gift hidden in that figure, and it matters just as much. While ice is melting, its temperature does not drift. It sits at 0 and stays there until the last of it has gone. So an ice bank does not merely store cold, it holds a steady temperature while it releases it, which is exactly what a freezer full of food actually needs. Now let us put that into a box. Those 334 kilojoules per kilogram convert to 92.8 watt-hours of cold per kilogram. So fill 100 liters of your chest freezer with water that is 100 kilograms and freeze it solid. You have stored 9.28 kilowatt-hours of cold. A chest freezer draws somewhere in the region of 1.2 kilowatt-hours a day. So that ice bank is not an afternoon of margin. It is days of it. And now, the comparison that actually decides this, measured like for like. Say you want to carry your freezer through 5 days of blackout. On a battery, that means roughly 6 usable kilowatt-hours. Call it half a Powerwall, and somewhere near $4,500. Or you fill the empty space in that freezer with tap water in reused bottles. Call it $10 if you have to buy the containers. Same 5 days, same food, same result at the end of the week. On the 12th of May, 1833, a brig called the Tuscany left Boston Harbor, carrying 180 tons of ice cut from a New England pond, bound for Calcutta. 16,000 miles, 4 months at sea, across the equator twice, into the mouth of the Ganges in September. When it arrived, a good number of people on the docks assumed the whole thing was an elaborate practical joke. Ice in Bengal, delivered by ship. 100 tons of it was still frozen. The man behind that voyage was Frederick Tudor, and his story is this video's build manual wearing period clothing. Start with what it cost him. The ice was free, cut from his family's pond in Massachusetts every winter. The insulation was free because sawdust was a waste product that lumber mills were delighted to have somebody haul away. And the freight was cheap because ships left Boston empty to collect cargo in the West Indies. So Tudor filled their holds for a discount. Free product, free insulation, discounted shipping. He still lost almost everything. His first shipment to Martinique in 1806 lost him $4,500. The next 3, to Cuba, lost him more. He spent parts of 1812 and 1813 in debtor's prison, while Boston society enjoyed the joke at his expense. What eventually saved him was insulation, and it took years of trial and error to get there. He tested wood shavings, he tested hay, he tested rice chaff. Sawdust won, and he learned to stack his blocks tight against one another like fitted masonry, because loosely packed ice presents far more surface to the warm air and melts far faster. Hold on to both of those, because they are the 2 rules of this entire build. Insulate properly and pack the mass tightly. Later, Henry David Thoreau stood at Walden Pond and watched Tudor's crews score the surface into a chessboard and cut it into 2-foot blocks. He wrote that the pure Walden water was being mingled with the sacred water of the Ganges. Now, the other half of the story, and it begins in the same year. In 1833, a physician named John Gorey arrived in Apalachicola, a hot cotton port on the Florida coast. His patients were burning with fever, and the treatment he wanted was cold. So he bought Tudor's ice, shipped down from New England, and packed it around them. It worked. It was also scarce, expensive, and entirely dependent on a supply chain that started 1,500 miles to the north. So Gorey built a machine to make ice artificially, and in 1851 he received a United States patent for it. That same year, his principal financial backer died. The press ridiculed the invention. The remaining investors withdrew their money. Gorey waited for a second patent on a method of cooling air, and it never came. He died in 1855, at 51 years old, having remarked that his inventions had been found in advance of the wants of the country. Tudor got rich, moving coal around the world in sawdust. Gorey went broke, inventing the machine that would eventually make moving it unnecessary. And the commodity they were both trading was never really water. It was the 80 degrees locked up inside it. In March of 2010, the World Health Organization pre-qualified a refrigerator with no battery in it. The category is called solar direct drive, and it exists because of a specific and brutal problem. Roughly 1 billion people are served by health facilities with no reliable access to electricity. Vaccines have a narrow temperature window and no tolerance whatsoever for a dark week. Break the cold chain and you do not lose money. You lose the doses, and then you lose the children they were meant for. Before that pre-qualification came 18 months of field testing, in places including Senegal and Indonesia. This was not a laboratory result. It was tested where it would have to work. Now look at the design, because it is the machine described in this video. The solar array drives the compressor directly. No battery, no charge controller. When the sun shines, the compressor runs. What that compressor freezes is a bank of water surrounding the vaccine compartment. At night, and through cloudy days, the ice is what holds the temperature. UNICEF's own description of the innovation puts it more plainly than I can. The energy of the sun is stored in ice instead of in batteries. The field metric even has a name. It is called autonomy, and it measures the number of consecutive cloudy days a unit can hold temperature with no useful sun at all. That is the number buyers compare when they choose between models. The related ice-line designs are just as instructive. One of those will hold vaccines below 8 degrees on as little as 8 hours of mains electricity in 24, and ride out at least 20 hours of complete blackout. Some models hold for more than 2 days, and this is not a pilot program or a pleasant story about innovation. Gavi's cold chain platform has procured more than 62,000 refrigerators and installed over 46,000 of them across supported countries, backed by more than $160 million. One of the pre-qualified designs came out of NASA Technology, by way of a company called Sundancer. So consider where that leaves us. The most rigorous cold storage certification in the world, for the most temperature-sensitive cargo on Earth, was granted to a machine whose battery is a tank of frozen water. So why is your freezer not built this way? Because it was designed for a grid that never fails. Think about what an appliance manufacturer is actually optimizing for when a new chest freezer goes into development. Shipping weight, because every kilogram costs money, on a pallet, in a container, and on a delivery van. Pull down time, because the machine is tested and reviewed on how fast it reaches temperature from empty. And underneath both of those, an assumption so complete that nobody in the building ever bothers to state it, that mains electricity is continuously available. Every one of those pressures pushes in exactly the same direction, toward minimum thermal mass. Mass is expensive to freight. Mass makes the machine look sluggish in a showroom test. And if the power never fails, mass buys you nothing at all, because the compressor can simply run whenever it likes. So the industry has spent decades perfecting a freezer that is as close to empty as it can possibly be, which is precisely the state in which it is most fragile. Your freezer is empty on purpose, and empty is the worst possible condition it can be in. Now look at the other industry. The people building vaccine refrigerators could not make that assumption. They were designing for clinics where the grid arrives some days and not others, where a generator runs out of diesel, and where nobody is coming to fix anything for a fortnight. Faced with the same physics and the opposite assumption about electricity, they arrived at the opposite machine. They packed it with water on purpose, tested it for 18 months, certified it, and deployed it tens of thousands of times. Two industries, identical physics, completely different answers, because one of them believed the power would stay on. And nobody hid this from you. There is simply no product in telling somebody to fill the empty space in their freezer with tap water. There is no warranty to sell on a bottle, no service call in 3 years, and no line item anybody can put on a quote. Let me be exact about the scope of what this does. Because it is narrow, This stores cold, and cold is what it gives back. It will not run your lights. It will not charge your phone. It will not keep the router alive. But it protects the one load you were actually frightened of losing. The whole build is a second-hand chest freezer, a solar panel, a controller, and as many bottles of tap water as will fit inside it. If you want the full build, the panel sizing, the compressor and controller options, and the thermostat conversion, we put together a complete walkthrough covering everything in this video and more. The link is in the description below. First, why a chest freezer specifically? Because the shape is not incidental. Cold air is denser than warm air. When you lift the lid on a chest freezer, that dense cold air stays in the box because it has nowhere to fall to. When you open the door on an upright, the cold pours out around your feet, and warm room air replaces it. That single difference is why a chest design uses substantially less energy for the same volume, and why it is the only sensible starting point for a build like this. Buy it used. $50 is a realistic secondhand price, and the only thing you need to verify before spending another cent is that the compressor runs and the box actually holds temperature. Now fill it. Every empty cubic inch in that freezer is space where warm air will sit when the power stops. So put water in it. Bottles, jugs, sealed containers, whatever you have. Pack them against the walls and leave air gaps between them for circulation. And leave headspace in every single container. Water expands by about 9% when it freezes. Fill a rigid bottle to the brim and it will split, and you will spend a Saturday chipping ice out of the bottom of your freezer. Then the power side. And this is where most attempts at this fail. A compressor does not draw a steady load. To start, it needs a surge that can be several times its running current, and it needs that surge instantly. You cannot simply wire a solar panel to an ordinary freezer and hope for the best. There are three honest routes. Buy a purpose-built DC compressor unit designed for direct solar. Fit a soft start module to an ordinary AC machine. Or keep a small buffer in the system whose only job is to carry that starting surge. Whichever you pick, size the array for the daily energy plus that surge. For a typical chest freezer, that lands somewhere in the region of 400 to 600 watts of panel. Now, 5 rules. 1. Headspace in every container. 9% expansion is not negotiable, and a burst bottle in a freezer is a genuinely miserable job. 2. Never block the airflow or cover the evaporator surfaces. The machine needs to move air to work. 3. Keep the lid shut. A full freezer holds a safe temperature for around 48 hours, and every single opening costs you hours off that number. 4. Do not stall the compressor. A machine that repeatedly tries to start on insufficient power will overheat its windings and burn out. This is the failure that destroys the appliance, and it is exactly why the soft start or the DC route is not optional. 5. Mind the weight. 100 liters of water is 100 kilograms added to a second-hand appliance. Check the floor and check the feet. Here are the 5 things I deliberately left out until now, because they only matter once you have decided to actually build this. The first is the fridge conversion, and it is the highest return modification in this entire video. Wire an external thermostat to the freezer, set it to hold around 4 degrees instead of -18, and the machine becomes a refrigerator. Its consumption drops dramatically, because you are now fighting a temperature difference of roughly 16 degrees against the room, instead of 38, through exactly the same walls of insulation. A chest freezer running as a fridge is one of the most efficient cold boxes you can own. The controller costs about $20. It also voids your appliance warranty, so do this on the secondhand machine and not on the new one in your kitchen. The second is salt. If you are running that box as a refrigerator, plain ice is the wrong storage medium. Ice holds at 0 degrees, which is colder than a fridge needs, and every degree of overshoot is energy you spent for nothing. Add salt to your water bottles, and you lower the freezing point, so the bank freezes and melts a few degrees below 0 instead. You get a buffer matched to the temperature you actually want. Label those bottles clearly. Brian is not drinking water in an emergency. The third is placement, and it is the difference between a system that works and a box full of bottles. Your water mass belongs against the walls, where the evaporator coils are. Your food belongs in the middle. You want the machine to be cooling the ice, and the ice to be cooling the food. Get that backwards, with food packed against the walls and water stacked in the center, and the ice bank spends its life buffering nothing in particular. The fourth is condensation, and it is what ruins most fridge conversions. A chest freezer running at refrigerator temperature will collect water in the bottom because you are now above freezing, and everything that would have become frost becomes a puddle instead. Plan for it. Either fit a small drain through the base, or accept that you will be sponging it out every few weeks. People who skip this step discover it as mold. The fifth is the honest cloudy day plan. Autonomy is the number that matters, and it is worth deciding deliberately rather than by accident. Pick how many sunless days you intend to survive, multiply by your daily consumption, then put in that much water. 2 days is casual. 5 days is serious. A week means the freezer is mostly ice with some food in it, and that is a legitimate choice if you live somewhere the power goes out for a week. Guessing is the one approach that does not work. This store's cold. It will not run a single light bulb. That is the honest boundary, and it is worth stating plainly. This build protects one load. It happens to be the load that was driving the $10,000 quote in the first place, but it is still one load, and everything else in your house goes dark exactly as it would have anyway. The compressor also still needs real power to run. $50 buys the box. The panel, the controller, and whichever route you take to survive the starting surge are the actual expense, and they are worth budgeting for honestly, rather than discovering halfway through a Saturday. A second-hand freezer is a second-hand compressor, and some of them will fail. And every time somebody lifts that lid to look for the peas, the clock starts again. None of that touches the arithmetic. 5 days of cold food costs about $4,500 in lithium, or about $10 in tap water. That gap is not close enough to argue about. Frederick Tudor sailed 100 tons of that same physics into the Ganges in 1833. The World Health Organization certified it in 2010, and the only reason it is not standard in your kitchen is that nobody has ever worked out how to sell you a bottle of water. If discovering the practical, unglamorous corners of self-reliance matters to you, subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure this kind of knowledge keeps being found. We will be tracking all of it as it develops. Now I want 2 numbers from you. How many liters your freezer holds, and what your last battery quote came to. I read every single one.